All right, so some of you got to be on this side here, over here. And we got space over here, so come on over here, Ben. Come, yeah. Yeah, we are really smiling today. Brendan, you got to be up here too. Yeah, sit next, right next to Sherry. Yeah, put your stuff down. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is John Choi, and I have this great honor and privilege to be and serve as our Ramsey County Attorney. And over the course of my time as a county attorney, and I've been in this role since 2011, I think one of the most important things that we need to be doing in the legal system and the criminal justice system is listening to our community and engaging with our community and thinking about ways that we get better outcomes and recognizing that we can't do the same things over and over and expect different outcomes. If we want things to change, then we need to think about how we could do the work differently, how we serve our residents, how we serve our youth and our families differently. I mean, the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over and expect a different outcome. And the journey for people up here today started in 2019, and it's because of really committed and dedicated people who came together, people from the county attorney's office, but more important are the people from our community. And you see our people here from all over our community, whether they're in law enforcement, in public health, whether in public defense, prosecution, and our community providers who do restorative justice work. We all came together, and I want to just call out some of the people here because it means so much to me that people are here today to be a part of this moment where we get to talk about the receipts, where we get to talk about the data and show the work and to show that what we've been doing over the past 4.5 years, almost 5, is actually doing better than what we used to do. And we have data over a course of 15 years to prove that. And it's all in this report. But I want to call out some people that are here. First of all, I want to thank you, Chief Sender, for being here, the president of our Ramsey County Chiefs Association, Mike Martin, representing Sheriff Bob Fletcher, and also Deputy Chief Sherry Folkowski. Sherry is down there, and Sherry was one of the original police officers that was involved in this conversation in 2019, and I'll talk about that. Thank you, Chief Dothitz, for being here, and of course, our Public Health Director in Ramsey County, Amy Karen. And you're going to hear later today from our State Department of Health Commissioner, Dr. Brooke Cunningham. And also want to call out Gloria Reyes, our Deputy County Manager, who's here, and of course our Judge, Jacob Kraus, who has been just a real integral part of just the more recent iterations of the change. And I really believe that as we take some next steps forward, as we try to think about how to expand this, Judge Kraus is going to take a very critical role in, I think, this expansion of doing this work. And then, of course, John Reimer, our Chief Public Defender, is here. And a lot of this work started with John's predecessor, where we had a conversation about all of this. And I'll talk a little bit about the importance of this partnership. And then, of course, we also have someone very special to this work, our first Assistant Mayor, Erica Schumacher, who played a really, really critical role in helping develop out this vision and this work around really working specifically with our community. So this story begins in 2019, where we started having some of these conversations about trying to get better outcomes in the youth justice system, recognizing the racial disparities that exist within that youth justice system, and thinking about a path forward. And so all of us collectively, many of the people in this room actually took a trip down to Yellow Medicine County. It's one of the most conservative parts of our state. But there, in southwestern Minnesota, they're doing something special. The community is engaged through restorative circles to support families and youth who are coming into the child protection system and into the juvenile delinquency system. And over the course of, and they've started this work like 20 years ago. And what the outcomes that they've been able to achieve is better public safety and reduce costs on out-of-home placements because they have figured out a way to engage community into the work of child protection and responding to juvenile delinquency. So we were inspired. And so we came back and we were resolved to do this work, and we had some really hard conversations. It required us to do things differently. So what we have been doing is shifting from an adversarial model where my lawyers fight against, it used to be where my lawyers would fight against John Reimer's lawyers, and we would somehow believe that through this process of dealing with a situation that the police brought us, that by processing, I'm not talking about murder, I'm not talking about violent sexual assaults or violent physical assaults, I'm talking about the vast majority of the cases that come in, whether they're thefts, whether they're simple assaults, things like that. As they come in, the police send them to us, they would ask us to do something about it, so then we would charge or petition the case, and then we would get a conviction. And typically the sentence would be some period of probation, some community service, maybe an apology letter, and we would move on to the next case. That's the traditional process that we always had. And instead, what we've been doing something far different, which is to develop a collaborative process, to have the prosecutor work closely with the public defender, to work closely with our community and our community providers. And instead of having an adversarial system, we developed out a collaborative one where we are working together and asking the right questions, not just about what did this young person do that violated the law, but more importantly, why did this young person do this? What are the underlying reasons for that justice involvement? And what can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? What can we do to do right by the person that was harmed? And move forward. And that's the work that this group has really undertaken. And when we launched officially this work in 2021, in July, it was met with a lot of criticism. And that's understandable. I'm going to give grace to all of those people that thought that this was not the right thing to do, because it's understandable. Because we have been raised to believe that somehow by bringing things into the legal system, that will produce more public safety, it will produce more justice for all. And we'll get to some of the truth of what happened. But the real truth is, and we have the data and the receipts to show it, and I'm so proud of this moment because this is the moment to tell you about those receipts. But the bottom line is this, is that we are producing a better version of safety because we have lower recidivism, lower re-referral rates significantly. And Cara Beckman from the University of Minnesota, who is also an integral part of our leadership team, will go over all of the data to explain that to you. But we're producing a better version of safety. Because we have historical data of kids going back to 2011. And we know that we can see that if we convicted somebody of some offense, we could follow them. Did they have subsequent justice involvement? Did they have connections to the adult system? Did they go to prison? All of that data we looked at. And now from 2021, we can start looking at the same type of data for these kids that we have been involved with, using this more collaborative approach, utilizing restorative practices in our responses. And we are producing that better version of safety. This is what everybody should be doing. In fact, I think one of the conclusions should be, it would be malpractice, actually, to go back to do something that was producing a lesser result, right? This is actually the new path forward. And it's really simple. It's relying on our community to help us solve those problems. It's relying on families to help solve those problems, because I think the solutions are found there, and not necessarily in processing a legal case. So I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Tamara Madison, who also has been a really integral part of our leadership journey. Dr. Madison.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Dr. Tamara Madison of Generation to Generation, and we've been a community provider for the past 5 years. Restorative circles are not simply a program strategy. They are a justice strategy rooted in dignity, accountability, and healing. Through Ramsey County's Reimagining Justice initiative, restorative circles create structured spaces where young people are seen, heard, and valued rather than labeled or discarded. For too long, traditional systems have responded to youth behavior, particularly Black and brown youth, with exclusion, punishment, and isolation. Restorative circles interrupt that pattern. They shift the question from what rule was broken to who was harmed, what were their needs, and how do we repair the harm. That reframing is transformational. In a restorative circle, youth sit face to face with peers, impacted parties, and trained facilitators. They speak their truth, they listen, they take responsibility, and they participate in crafting agreements to repair the harm. This process builds emotional literacy, strengthens empathy, and reinforces community accountability. It does not minimize harm, it addresses it directly, but in a way that promotes growth instead of shame. The Reimagining Justice program understands that safety is not created through punishment alone. Safety is built through connection, opportunity, and restoration. Restorative circles reduce recidivism, strengthen relationships, and keep young people engaged in school and community rather than pushing them deeper into the system involvement. Most importantly, circles communicate a powerful message to youth. You are more than your worst mistake. You are capable of repair, and you belong here. And in closing, when we invest in restorative circles, we invest in long-term public safety, community trust, and the next generation's leadership. Reimagining justice means moving from reaction to restoration. And restorative circles are one of the clearest, most effective pathways to get there. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Juliet Mitchell, and I am on Team Generation to Generation with Dr. Tamara. And I have the pleasure and the honor of delivering a message from a young person I worked with personally. When we do circle, one of the integral parts of that circle is asking what happened and what was the impact on the person who was harmed or perceived harm. But we also ask, how were you impacted as well? So this is her statement. I'm 17 years old in the 12th grade. In the future, I plan to join the Army after graduation to pay for college and gain experience in my future career. In response to the incident, I expected to be charged and have to go to court and have the incident affect my plans for the future. Instead, I joined the program and I learned to be more careful in making decisions and also improved many skills. It was better than I expected because instead of something negative, I met a very kind-hearted woman who taught me many useful skills. I unfortunately trusted the wrong person who put me in a position I never thought I would be in. To make it right, I learned from my mistakes, and now I know who to trust and how to make sure I'm never in that situation again. I think this type of work is very important and should be continued because it gives people hope and it teaches them valuable skills and lessons. And is more likely to stop people from repeating their mistakes in a positive way than a negative punishment would. I think this work should be more common, especially with young people, so they have a chance to have a successful future. I'm glad I had this opportunity and met Miss J, that'd be me, and I think others deserve to have the same opportunity. The work that I did with this young person outside of the circle, her goal was she wanted a job so that she could purchase the things and help out her mom. She just got a job at one of the local community centers. She's slated for graduation, and she is on track to join the military. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Juliet. Thank you, Dr. Madison, and thank you, County Attorney Choi. My name is Cara Beckman. I'm an applied researcher at the University of Minnesota Medical School, and I've had the honor to be the research partner on this project. Along with my co-author and statistician extraordinaire, Rebecca Fries, I conducted the research we are presenting today. Canadian Prime Minister Paul Carney's recent speech at Davis named that there are times that call us to stop performing an illusion and instead begin creating a better world. One such illusion that we largely continue to perform in our society is that safety comes through punishment and control. Our Minnesota neighbors stopped performing that illusion heroically over the past few months, demonstrating to the world that safety is not blind compliance to authority, but active engagement in your neighbor's well-being. In July of 2021, the Ramsey County Attorney and community partners stopped performing a similar illusion, that we achieve safety through punishing youth. Instead, they started working to achieve better results through more community-based restorative justice processes. 4 years ago, we released findings justifying why it made sense to stop performing that illusion, showing the legal system in Ramsey County was not getting the outcomes we claim to want for youth. This remains a nearly unprecedented show of legal system transparency. Back then, we saw that diversion outperformed processing in traditional court, both after a youth's first case, when 29% of youth recidivated after their case was processed in court, versus 10% if their case was diverted. Or after a second case, when recidivism rates were 41% after court, compared to 27% after diversion. In response to these and other findings, Reimagining Justice for Youth was designed and launched. As County Attorney Choi alluded to, before the change, law enforcement submitted cases to the county attorney. Prosecutors would review the case for legal sufficiency and then decide alone whether to charge, divert, or decline a case. Between 2010 and 2021, this resulted in 65% of cases being charged and processed in court and 18% being diverted. With the launch of RJY, a major change included how initial case decisions were reached, with the collaborative review team of a prosecuting attorney, a public defender, and a trained community member considering who had been harmed, what their needs might be, who caused the harm, and how developmental needs may have played a role, what impacts and underlying factors would need to be addressed, and what responses would most likely be effective. There were also changes in what youth would experience if their case was diverted, which would no longer be a standardized, less punitive program based on offense types, like assigned community service hours for a theft or a health class for a possession or consumption offense. Instead, far more youth would resolve their incidents in what would now be called community accountability, through programs like what Dr. Madison and Ms. Juliet just described. Further, more providers shared lived experiences and cultural backgrounds with the youth and families they serve. Despite the backlash County Attorney Choi alluded to and some scaling back of initial plans, enough of the original vision was retained that today we can report meaningful changes in responses to youth cases. Between July 2021 and December 2024, youth cases processed in court dropped to 50%, while cases sent to community-based accountability increased to 25%. The increase in cases addressed through community accountability occurred despite submitted cases being more severe on average in the past 4 years compared to the decade prior. This means the range of cases being addressed in community accountability was indeed different. We especially saw changes in cases that were previously ineligible for diversion. For example, prior to Reimagining Justice for Youth, assault cases were 1% of diverted cases, and since RJY launched, they are 19% of cases sent to community accountability. Similarly, submitted gross misdemeanor and felony cases rose from being a total of 5% of diverted cases prior to Reimagining Justice for Youth to 32% of cases sent to community accountability during Reimagine Justice for Youth. The changes also resulted in decreased racial disparities in access to community accountability. This slide shows the differences between proportions for racial groups of cases submitted to the county attorney and cases diverted. The goal is to be at or near 0% and would occur if, for example, a racial group was 5% of submitted cases and 5% of diverted cases, meaning there is neither over nor under representation, and a person's race would not predict how we respond to their behavior. While not shown, American Indian, Asian, and Latino youth all had 2% or lower disproportionality before and since the implementation of Reimagining Justice for Youth. But the underrepresentation of Black youth in getting access to community accountability moved 12% closer to equitable access, while the overrepresentation of white youth decreased by 8%, moving from 12% to 4%. Similar movement occurred in terms of success rates in community accountability, with improvements in underrepresentation of Black youth and overrepresentation of white youth in terms of whether they were successful in community accountability. Thus, more youth and youth with more serious cases are getting access to and being successful in community-based accountability, rather than having their cases processed in court. And yet, headlines such as the one that read, "Crime but no punishment," shortly after the county attorney began this work, implied this was a dangerous policy. But is it? Here are the updated recidivism numbers for the RJY era. One-year recidivism rates after a first case successfully referred to community accountability are 4%, compared to 29% for cases processed in traditional court. This would mean young people successful in community accountability after their first case are 86% less likely to recidivate. However, because we haven't controlled for important factors that might influence these differences, that's not an accurate way to describe the impact. So what did we do to more precisely calculate the risk of recidivism? The specific changes to responses for assault and felony or gross misdemeanor cases resulted in a natural experiment where youth in similar situations got very different treatment over a short period of time. This allowed us to compare groups of youth who were nearly identical except for how we responded to their cases. The math looked like this. Bear with me here, this is the fun part. First, we isolated 3 types of cases. Youth who were referred for the first time for an assault case, youth who were referred for the first time for a felony or gross misdemeanor case, and youth who were on their second referral for any type of case. Then, for each type of case or data set, we used a matching algorithm to pair youth who were successful in community accountability with a different youth whose similar case had been processed in traditional court. We matched on race, gender, age, year of offense, offense severity, and a few other variables. The matching algorithm resulted in 2 groups of youth that were remarkably similar, except that one group experienced successful community accountability and the other group's cases were processed in court. For example, this table shows the matched cases for first referral assault cases, showing exact matches on gender and nearly exact on age. With these groups, we then conducted logistic regression, which accounted for any remaining imbalances in the groups to calculate a risk ratio for whether young people in each group would recidivate. These apples-to-apples comparisons are one of the strongest study designs possible outside of randomized control trials. Our findings clearly indicate that community accountability outperforms traditional court processing. Youth whose first referral assault cases were resolved in community accountability had 66% reduced risk of recidivism compared to similar cases processed in traditional court. Put another way, youth whose cases were processed in court had 3 times the risk of recidivism compared to youth who experienced successful accountability. Youth whose first referral felony or gross misdemeanor cases were resolved in community accountability had 50% lower risk, or half the risk of recidivism compared to similar cases processed in traditional court. And in all other models, youth successful in community accountability did just as well as youth whose cases were processed in court in terms of recidivism or re-referrals. In other words, reimagining justice for youth is working. Our study is further evidence that turning to each other keeps us more safe than relying on punishment and control, as our neighbors have reminded us over the past few months. When we value humanity first, center the wisdom and lived experience of those most impacted, and are transparent and honest with data, we can come together to make a difference. The evidence clearly shows that the county attorney should continue and consider expanding reimagining justice for youth. We have yet to find a population for whom there is evidence that community accountability is less effective than traditional court processing. All youth should have access to our most effective responses. Thank you. I now have the honor of inviting Minnesota Commissioner of Health, Dr. Brooke Cunningham, to share her perspective on this study.
Good morning, everyone. I am happy to be here. I'm going to start by sharing with you all, this is the second time in less than a week that I have been with partners in a space talking about juvenile justice-involved young people. The first was the Juvenile Justice Advisory Committee at the state with policymakers, community members, legislators, and the second is here today. And the evidence is compelling, but let me tell you what is equally compelling to me is the partnership. I am as excited about the partnership as I am about the data. The data is strong, but I am also excited about the partnership because it speaks to the magnitude of the problem. It speaks to how we generate new solutions that are actually effective. It has community at the center, and we're talking about community accountability not only in the science, but also with young people, right? And so I am thrilled to be here today, to think with people, to share this data with everybody in our communities about a way to do things better. We know that the traditional justice response disproportionately impacts communities facing social inequities. Community-based restorative justice aims to address the needs of victims, the accountability of offenders, and involve the community in the healing process. You know, I'm in health, and a lot of our young people are struggling, particularly with mental health needs, as they get involved with the criminal justice system. And we know we need spaces where healing can happen. For those young people, they need health care, but they also need healing. And so this sort of work is particularly important because young people who come into contact with the legal system should go through a process that promotes positive, healthy development and doesn't rob them of their future. From a public health perspective, this model is rooted in reducing harm and improving well-being across the generations. And research tells us that adverse childhood events, abuse, feeling unsafe in your neighborhood, witnessing violence, poverty, increase a young person's risk of contact with the justice system. And that contact, whether it is for adults or for the babies, right, can be an adverse childhood experience itself as people move through their life course. And certainly MDH, the Minnesota Department of Health, wants to create space for work like this, work around incarceration and health. But we want to also be there with folks who are trying to prevent, right, the touch of the legal system in the first place, and to not forget those who have that touch. At MDH, we're working to prevent adverse childhood experiences by connecting youth to caring adults. And I just heard you talk about that as one of the core components of the program. We're providing education about adverse childhood events and trauma-informed practices for correction staff and currently incarcerated parents, right? We are mindful, again, of those risk factors, and certainly sexual violence and human trafficking is a risk factor for our young people to be impacted by the criminal justice system. And the Ramsey County Attorney's Office is also playing a pivotal role in building our statewide response to sexual exploitation and trafficking of youth called Safe Harbor. And while we work in these spaces, you all, again, we need partners. And so, again, I am happy to be here because you all know that government won't get it right without community. You all know that spaces like public health are underfunded to do it by themselves. And so I am glad to be here to think about successful interventions such as community-based restorative justice. I'm happy to be here to think about how we can create positive outcomes for young people, to support them, to support their ongoing development and their later contribution in the community. Again, the story of the young woman. That is powerful. Community accountability models helps keep people connected to families, to schools, to services. It helps support healthier outcomes. Community accountability models don't replace accountability, they strengthen it. And this report highlights a step in the right direction to providing young people with a better chance of succeeding and achieving bright futures. This work stretches, as I've mentioned, across sectors, agencies, jurisdictions, and working together, we can think about those new solutions, those alternatives to the traditional system that is not producing the outcomes that we want to see for our young people. We can help our youth reach their full potential and overcome adversity. We can support positive youth development, and I am happy to be here today with everybody in this room, and certainly the folk up here with me, to engage in this important conversation. This is great work. I'm happy to have been invited to speak a little bit. Thank you all for all that you have done. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. My name is John Reimer. I'm head of the Public Defender Office. I don't think anyone warned John Choi that you should never give me a microphone. Out of respect to your time, I will be brutally efficient, though. You'd heard everyone talk, and the bottom line is that this works. I've been a public defender for 30 years. I've been part of processes where everybody wants to try and do something different. I came into my position, and I would be remiss if I don't acknowledge two of my lawyers here, my managing attorney, Amanda, and Eric, who's one of the primary attorneys that deals with this. I had the experience and the intelligence to listen to them to say, is this worth our time? Because I have seen public defenders use resources to go left and right and try and do something different. Because what do we want? We want better outcomes for people. Community wants to be safe. And quite frankly, when we can reduce recidivism, it reduces caseloads. And it's just not about numbers. It's about human being outcomes. It's about connecting. And so when Amanda and Eric told me this is worth it, I also knew John. And one of the things I looked at is, who is he assembling? And John is very good. And part of the reason I said full in is because he doesn't pick who the community is. He says, who's the community, and has the community come to him. And so I participated in programs where it is leaders who self-define who the community is. And that is very frustrating, and it's got to be very disappointing. This is a program that looks at everyone and says, who's the community, who has been hurt, how can we build, and how can we do something different? The fact that they are building and repairing individuals is significant. It is significant that recidivism is being reduced. In a couple of years, we're going to be able to look at the data of what happens, because a person just doesn't wake up and say, I'm 18 now, and I'm going to engage in certain behaviors. I mean, we're looking at long-term the ability to say we're impacting overall community safety as we move through life, not just recidivism with youth, but just collectively how they live within the community and how the community embraces them. And so I really want to thank everyone. I know everyone had to take a little step into the circle and say, who's going to do what? It takes bravery to look at things and say, let's do it different. And it takes intelligence to say, let's look at what could be done, as opposed to what we think should be done. And this is an example of looking at what can be done and listening to other people. So I'm very proud that this is moving forward. I'm very pleased that it has the impact I think that we all thought it would. But it is just, somebody had to take those steps. So I really want to applaud you, John. Thank you for taking that chance. And I really appreciate all the work that everybody put into this, because this is just not a couple people that get together. So thank you.
We have time for some questions. A few things to think about. We will be sending out, as we usually do, not only the report that University of Minnesota generated, I think maybe also their slides. Sure. And a couple of other helpful items. But this is your time to clarify, after this piles of information. So, who would like to start with a question? Got it right, no one has.
Can you talk a little bit about, what will come next, and will this expand, and kind of the future of the program?
So I think we still, I mean, this is a long-term, I view this to be like a marathon that has no end. And we keep refining, and we talked about this iterative process. I think we're still trying to improve on things, but clearly the data would support that we need to start thinking about how we might expand this. So one of the areas is there's a category of how we would respond to what's being presented to us. We could refer the case back to families. We could refer the case back to community-based accountability, which is the restorative justice model that we've been talking about here today. Sometimes we also petition cases into the court, right? And there's cases that even the collaborative review team has not looked at, but I think there are probably some opportunities there to work with judges around some of those maybe more difficult cases about looking at community-based accountability as to increase that. And then I think overall, this should inform the work not only in the youth justice system, but it should also inform the work that we're doing for younger people ages 18 to 24. Because there's something to be said about recognizing and understanding that development and also in thinking about how to actually get to these numbers about how do we get better safety results. And those safety results in terms of what everybody in the community wants, whatever the behavior that is bad that the police had to get called to, we want that to stop. But usually there's something more to it than that. And so if we can invest in and work with our community to figure that out, to get that bad behavior to stop. If someone has been harmed, I think another area that we need to expand is just how we support our victims, the people that have been harmed. And I think if we actually have more resources in that area, we'll be able to bring more of these cases in, because oftentimes there's a component that we need to have some form of restitution and things like that. So we do have a grand vision that one day we will be able to, working with philanthropy and some of the resources that I think we can cobble together, but actually create a restitution fund to support this work. And I think with that, I think we'll even see growth with our numbers as well. So I'm really excited about our future, but it's a step-by-step process, and I really think that it depends a lot on just the conversations that we're having in our community. And so how you report the story and getting people to start asking questions. And they should want what I just said. They should want better versions of safety and better versions of justice. And if they're telling us they want that, we can expand these types of things, right? So thank you for that question.
Can you talk about how this compares to what they're doing in Ramsey?
I think they're moving towards more of a restorative responses, but I don't really know. I mean, Cara might be able to be the person to do it, to say what they're doing in Hennepin. Maybe you could just ask them. You know, I know that they're trying to move more towards a restorative model. They don't have a collaborative review team process or anything like that. I'm almost certain of that.
And secondly, will there be an effort to have the data peer reviewed?
Short answer, yes. That's our next step, is to get it into a journal.
And this will be journal.
Yeah.
Problem is that takes 2 years sometimes. Yeah. Yes, our next step is to write this up for a peer-reviewed journal article. We didn't think that the community needed to wait for that. That might take 2 years to get published, but yes, that's absolutely where we're going next.
Yeah, so are there any particular categories of crimes that were going through the traditional court system previously that were like the majority of ones where you feel like, you know, those are ones that have been moved over and are better to be going through this new system?
I think the assaults, talking about the apples and apples, I think we should.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly saw, so where we saw the biggest movement was in the assault cases and in the gross misdemeanor and felony cases. And as you saw, I'll put it up again since it's still here. Oops, this way. You know, a 66% reduction in terms of, and that aligns directly with the theory of restorative justice as relational accountability, right? Considering the impact on the person you harmed. Almost always, assault cases happen with somebody you know. And to reckon with the impact of on that person, rather than to go through a system that wants you to be accountable to the laws, rather than accountable to the person you hurt, has a different kind of impact emotionally and socially on the young person as they are going through that in terms of what they are learning and how they are seeing themselves in society. So I think those cases that have a human impact, there are a lot of young people who are arrested in our communities for stuff that, whether it's trespassing or consumption or the kind of things where, there's the danger that they might hurt themselves or others, but they haven't actually hurt themselves or others. That has its own but assault cases, theft cases, robbery cases, where there is a clear impact on a human being, and we can ask them to reckon with that in a way that, as Dr. Madison, I think, is the one who said it, promotes, not shame and guilt, but growth and kind of a reckoning with that. That's where we see the real bang for the buck.
Patrick, I just want to also follow up on, you had asked about peer review, which certainly the data here is very sound. And we have also been releasing every year our data. So I just want the public to know that if you go on our website, you'll see the data from year 1, year 2, year 3. This is the first time we've done comprehensive data. And we have a commitment, because I've always looked at this as a 10-year project. So from 2021 to 2031, every year we're going to release the data. And we said that from when we started this, that if this is not working, if this is not leading to better public safety results, we'll stop. But I had a thought, talking with our community, because they have lots of wisdom, that if we lean more forward into restorative practices, right, and think about ways in which we can develop a less adversarial model into more collaborative one, working with public defenders, that we could get there. And what you're seeing is we're almost halfway through this 10-year process. And I really believe that at the 10-year mark, we're going to show some even more compelling data.
It's not a question. I just want to point something out. Because we always talk about a young person in front of a judge as a symptom of a failed environment. And I can almost say this verbatim because I say it so much, but I'm going to read it, right? It's from the Department of Corrections in 1973 in Minnesota, has the Implementation Guidelines, Community Corrections Act of 73. I'm going to say what took so long, right? Come on, baby. Come on, thanks.
And David, as you're looking, you should tell everybody who you are. Yes.
So my name is David Starks, and I work for Face to Face, and I am a community provider. We help benefit the community through the partnership with Ramsey County Attorney's Office, CRT process, and Alliance, Ramsey County Attorney's, I should say. But just one part of the implementation guidelines says inappropriate correctional solutions. This is 1973, y'all. A large number of recent studies tell us that criminal behavior is rooted in a community's socioeconomic problem. If the community is a source of such deviant behavior, then logically it should provide the solution. It makes little sense to banish the lawbreaker from his community, place him in a disorienting, artificial situation, and expect him to return home well-adjusted. It makes a good deal of sense, however, to keep him in his regular surroundings, extend him special assistance, help him to be reintegrated to work, training, education, family, and friends. And I feel like it took 48 years, but I sure damn thank you. It was talking about restorative justice before we knew we were familiar with restorative justice.
Bear with me because I still have not had my caffeine, so I hope I didn't miss this part of what you guys were saying. You guys talked about reduced recidivism being held in community, but I don't recall you guys actually talking about the components of what that actually looks like. And then also, since there is a focus on youth and a lot of this happens as they're going through the school system, is there a collaboration plan to happen there or not?
Yeah, so when we get a case referral, we reach out to, if there's a victim involved, we reach out to the person that caused the harm. and we try to get them in the same circle. If we don't, we still provide circles for the victim and for the person that caused the harm. So we do, Generation to Generation is in the St. Paul Public Schools, and we use Circle to build the skill sets around restorative practice. So yes, we are definitely expanding to the schools.
Can I comment on that? This is an actual case that I am finishing up now. The incident happened in Ramsey County, even though the school was not St. Paul Public Schools. So between the mom, the resource team at the school, and the students, safe people, trusted allies at the school, we had the circle at the school. So we do work with the schools when we can. We're pretty flexible now. Thank goodness to COVID. Sometimes we do Zoom. We use our public spaces. We use schools. We don't go into people's homes, but we try to use public spaces where we all feel safe, and that is convenient for the family as well as the circle keepers as well.
Thank you for asking about the recidivism. Often when people ask me if I think that it's going to happen again, I ask people, have the choices changed? Have we offered opportunity that is different from what they were faced with in the beginning? I think that's what stops the recidivism. And even to your question about what's next, I'm hoping that other counties will also get on board, right? That other counties will see this. Because I've talked to parents who have said, this is not available in my county. I wish it was. And their lawyers advise them, if they have it available there and you have access to it, please take advantage of that opportunity for our kids. And I work in the public school system, and it's interesting to me that I gave a presentation this morning to a group of teachers, and I said, what happens when a kid can't read? We teach, right? When a kid can't swim, we teach. But when a kid doesn't know how to behave, do we teach or do we punish? So we have to think about, how are we presenting choices to young people? And do they even have choices? Because on that collaborative review team, after we have taken a child or a family out of context, we have to put them back in context for it to make sense. Why would a child come and steal this? Or why would a child come and shoot or take a gun somewhere or do whatever? Why would a child do that? It makes no sense if you just look at the kid. But it makes a lot of sense when So this process works to the tune of about 300 families a year, keeping those kids out of the JDC. And I'm hoping that it grows exponentially, but at least maybe we can do 500 next year, right? Or we would expand to Dakota County or whatever, the Washington County, and all of these counties where everybody has access to this process. So thank you. I'm Brenda Burnside. I'm a community member and circle keeper. Thanks. Burnside.
All right, time for one more question. Sorry, two more questions, because that's just generous, so.
You mentioned that the successful community, so what percentage are not successful?
It's in the report, and so I should have a copy of the report. Overall, it was 57% are successful, but when it came actually to assault cases and felony cases, they had the highest success rate. They were more in the 70% range, and that's across the 4 years. And we saw the lowest rate of, and as County Attorney Choi said, we have our annual metrics on, and our success rate has gotten better each year. But overall, across the 4 years, I believe it was 57%.
So maybe this is a little technical, but if we're comparing the people who successfully completed the program versus traditional court, are we putting our thumb on the scale?
So what we did was, the problem is, as you can imagine, the county attorney didn't design this as a randomized control trial. And so what happened is young people who came back unsuccessfully either got the case declined and nothing happened. They had the opportunity to try and resolve it with another community provider, or they got charged in court. And so there wasn't a clean way to separate out the young people who got both, were unsuccessful and were later charged in court. Almost all of the cases who end up unsuccessful have no contact, and so actually don't really get the opportunity to try community accountability. So if they ended up in the bucket of people who were eventually charged in court, that's the bucket they were in. It's how they ended. And anybody who was unsuccessful but had their case declined is not included in the study.
I was wondering, is there any sense of just the mixture of, do most of the county's police departments seem to be on board with this, or are there some that are not really in favor of the system?
Well, I mean, you see a lot of people here. I asked people, we've been sharing the information and the data with them through regular meetings that we have. And I think the role of the police is to protect and serve our residents. And oftentimes how they do that is when somebody calls 911. And so they go towards the danger, they go towards whatever it is to bring peace to that situation. And oftentimes they will maybe come to the conclusion that someone has been harmed, maybe a crime has been committed. They'll type up a police report, right? And they submit it to us. And what I want them to believe, and I think they all do, is that regardless of what we're doing in our legal system, as long as it's working, and we're showing the numbers here that prove it, I think they're supportive, because their job is to deal with that situation, provide the peace that's needed at that moment, investigate crimes, which is such an important function of police, and then submit those cases to us. And then I think that's their lane. Our lane is to then figure out how do we respond. So in many instances, the response is we need to file a complaint or a petition and bring it into court and prosecute them and get a conviction and have a sentence. And some modicum of punishment that might result in incarceration. But that's not what the majority of cases that we receive. In fact, most of them, our number one cases, like in the adult system, are theft, drugs, things like that, right? And so I think what they should expect of us is to get an outcome that addresses recidivism so they don't come back into the system. So I think that's generally where the police are always at. But I don't know if people want to, add to that. Mike, you're always good.
I knew I was going to get picked on. I'm Under Sheriff, it's all one word, Mike Martin from the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office. I've been a cop now, I was just thinking about it this morning, for 37 years. And I can tell you this is the most promising thing I've seen. And I think I can speak on behalf of Chief Zender and the other chiefs in Ramsey County who are all on board with this. We go out oftentimes and arrest people who we know that it's a symptom of other things, social issues, poverty, chemical dependency, mental illness, family dynamics, and we don't want to keep going out there. All of us became cops because we want to make a difference, not because we want to arrest more people. And this is an opportunity to get to the root of the issue. I know Chief Axel Henry, who's not here, from St. Paul, will tell you that if we prevent something from happening, that's the gold medal. And since we're at Olympic time, I threw in that reference. But if we can prevent, there's three ways we could deal with crime: prevention, intervention, and suppression. And suppression will help us stop an emerging pattern of violence, but it doesn't get to the root problems. We have to get to kids before, and then if they get involved, intervene before their behavior takes them down the wrong track. And I think that intervention is what we're talking about here. I can tell you empirically, we've seen a huge decrease in auto thefts and carjackings as a result of this work. Our auto theft team, our carjacking and auto theft team, used to arrest, people in stolen cars 3-4 times a day at least. And now we're lucky if we can find one, and I don't mean lucky, but it's unusual to have more than one arrest in a day of people in a stolen car. So, and when I run into kids in the mall, I'm at Rosedale Mall, and kids come up and say, "Hey, Officer Martin, look at me, I'm doing well. This is my daughter, this is my spouse, and I'm back in school and I'm working." That's rewarding to us. That's what we want to hear. So we appreciate this work. I don't have all the fancy terms for the data analysis, but empirically I can tell you that it works.
Thank you all. Most folks will stick around and answer follow-up questions, but
What's on the food?
there's no food. Director for the soul food.